No way they actually do this, as Brad Stevens and the front office has already made some big time moves in the last 24 hours and are still taking calls with the latest reports revolving around Jaylen Brown and Derrick White. But I have full confidence to say that I don't think that either player will be traded, all due to the fact that the reports have led us to believe that the asking price is way too high for these players, and that the Celtics would love to keep these guys to once again keep this core around Jayson Tatum when he comes back from this injury. In today's episode, we're going to go over those recent reports and kind of go why I think that this will not happen for the Boston Celtics leading up to the draft, and how things are going to be very key with building this core into the next few years. We'll be diving into all of that and more on this episode of Celtics Digest. I am Bruce Veliz, and you guys have been fantastic. You've been showing your love, showing support on the videos. We had Nick NBA on one of our videos earlier today, which was absolutely fantastic. Definitely go check that one out. Patrick and I have been doing some solos, some duos, and Nick has been also getting you guys with some trade updates as well revolving around this Celtics team. So like I said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you do enjoy the content, make sure to continue to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on everything, as the Celtics have obviously been in the whirlwind of news, and obviously it's not going to be slowing down as the draft is tonight. We'll have some videos coming up about the draft prospects the Celtics do draft, and also leading into tomorrow and into free agency, there are going to be more moves coming with this squad. So if you want to stay up to date, hit the subscribe button. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, and let's get into today's video at hand today. So make sure to grab that snack and let's dive into it. And personally, I don't think it is happening with Jaylen Brown, with a guy in Derrick White, for many reasons. Now, I recorded this video on Monday night already, kind of before they did trade guys like Jrue and they did trade guys like KP, but I've had to re-record the video due to the fact that so much news has come out. But I do have a snippet from that video that I do want to play for you guys that kind of resembles how I felt back then on Monday and similarly resembles how I feel right now. Once again, I think that they'll be staying. I don't think there's going to be getting traded at all. There's no way that Brad Stevens trades away Derrick White or Jaylen Brown this off season. I do think, obviously, Porziņģis, Jrue Holiday, Sam Hauser, some names to keep an eye on gearing up for the draft. And like I said, I thought that they could potentially trade guys like Sam Hauser, Jrue Holiday, maybe even a guy in Kristaps Porziņģis to shed some salary, but I was confident they weren't trading Derrick White. They weren't trading Jaylen Brown. And we look at even with the updates coming from yesterday from Shams, which we'll get into in a little bit, they still have yet to move those guys since those updates have come out. And that just goes to show you that, once again, even though the Celtics are fielding offers, which I don't blame them in doing so, it's going to take a lot to realistically get them over the hump to potentially even do a deal revolving around one of these guys, right? Shams Charania was on yesterday talking about the Celtics taking incoming calls on Jaylen Brown and Derrick White, as they also shed $180 million in taxes by trading away Porziņģis and trading away Jrue Holiday. He also mentioned some other things revolving around the Celtics, which was not in this aggregated post here on Shams Charania, which detailed that the Celtics could still consider moving contracts like Anthony Simons, or even moving a deal like Sam Hauser as well, to potentially even help them shed some more money under the apron, which once again leads me to believe that guys like Derrick White and Jaylen Brown will take an absolute offer of a massive haul or offer for Brad Stevens to even consider even parting ways with them. Now, we saw Brian Windhorst come on ESPN today as well, say several teams in the top 10 of the draft have been making those calls, and the Celtics have had a report where they've been linked to wanting to move up in the draft to potentially draft Kristaps Porziņģis, and our guy Patrick had a video on that this morning detailing that, and that does make some sense for the Celtics trying to shed some salary, maybe move off one of these guys, with the teams linked to Jaylen Brown and Derrick White, which we'll get into just in a little bit in the last couple hours today, do make sense with those picks. I ultimately don't think that pick itself is going to be able to get a deal done, right? Obviously, Jaylen Brown's name has been brought up. The Utah Jazz have been apparently making an aggressive push to try to get Jaylen Brown, and if you dive in deep from this article written about Brett Siegel here, from Brett Siegel detailing it, it says that there was no concrete offer realistically even put out there. They don't even know the concrete offer, but a potential framework of the 5th overall pick with some salary fillers with going back to Boston would make sense for Jaylen Brown. And personally, in my opinion, I don't think that that's enough to trade a guy in Jaylen Brown this season. I do believe that a guy like Jaylen Brown is going to command more than what Desmond Bane commanded, which would be multiple first-round picks and multiple pretty solid players that can fit into this salary here at breaking it down from $50 million down to 2 or 3 salaries. That's where it comes in with the salary fillers, where it does kind of make sense. But ultimately, I do think there would have to be more draft capital included. Added to the fact that Jaylen Brown going to Utah also doesn't really make so much sense for the direction of Utah going. So I do think that there's some smoke realistically listening with this one. Danny Ainge maybe trying to bump up the offer of Jaylen Brown to those teams that are interested and trying to gauge out there in the market. But once again, like I said, if a team like San Antonio does call, I do think it's going to have to require the number 2 pick, Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, and much more to get a guy like Jaylen Brown. And I don't know if a team like San Antonio is willing to do that, right? Brad Stevens' asking price for these players is going to be very, very high. So if you're a team that's willing to throw in the farm for a player like Jaylen Brown, then obviously I can see it going down because it'd be kind of pointless to not do that deal. But unless you're offering a Godfather type offer to a team like Brad Stevens is not going to consider that. And like I said, they already did shed this salary, right? They don't need to even trade players like Derrick White and Jaylen Brown even going into this. The Raptors showed some interest in Derrick White as well, involving the 9th overall pick. But like I mentioned, for the Raptors taking on a $30 million salary, it does not really make sense unless they're trading the Celtics, Jakob Poeltl, the 9th overall pick, and other future round first, so the Celtics can have some formidable play at that center position. But then once again, that puts the Raptors in a questionable spot because now they don't have a first round pick to draft a center and they don't have a center under the roster. So why would that make even sense for Toronto? That's what these rumors are really coming into. It does seem like teams like Toronto, Utah might have been interested in these guys, maybe have had these talks around a guy like Derrick White or Jaylen Brown, but it does seem like the Celtics are very reluctant for moving on from those guys basically for what is being offered. The Celtics, like we know, have already shed some money in the luxury tax, right? Trading away Jrue Holiday to Portland, trading away Kristaps Porziņģis to Atlanta. Unfortunately, those deals did have to come, and fans were preparing for those, but Brad Stevens, in those 24 hours, shrunk the salary of the projected luxury tax apron from $540 million all the way down to $280 million just in about 10 days, which is just absolute master practice from a guy in Brad Stevens. We want to look at this roster once again. Like I said, the Celtics are now underneath into the second apron here with $203 million. That means they're in the first apron, which allows them to have the extent of a mid-level exception up to $5.7 million, and still realistically would need to shed some salary, to drop below into the first apron or even into the tax threshold to have a little bit more flexibility. Like I mentioned, the tax threshold there is at $187 million. So for the Boston Celtics, that would require them shedding $16 more million. And that doesn't require a trade revolving around Derrick White at $30 million or a trade revolving around Jaylen Brown at $50 million. That could require moving a guy like Anthony Simons, who makes roughly around 25, and possibly trading him back for a guy that makes 12, 13, maybe even $10 million, or possibly looking to shed the salary of a guy, like I mentioned, in Sam Hauser, maybe even adding a contract in Georges Niang to do so for the Boston Celtics to aggregate salaries to hopefully maybe lose some money there and potentially have the flexibility to offer Al Horford, Luke Cornett, those options in free agency, and then once again be able to restructure this roster and really get it together. Like I mentioned, they don't need to trade Jaylen Brown, they don't need to trade Derrick White. With doing these two moves, they have now, by trading KP and trading Jrue Holiday, they have set themselves up perfectly, right? And I think the kind of key telling point of why they're not going to be trading Jaylen Brown was how Brad Stevens handled this Porziņģis deal, right? We all kind of figured with Jrue Holiday, with Kristaps Porziņģis contracts, Celtics would have to take some salary back, right? The only team that could realistically take Porziņģis in for his full salary was Brooklyn, and they did get involved in that deal, taking on the bigger salary in Terrence Mann, so the Celtics could shed all that salary and drop into the second apron. But if Brad had a feeling where he could move Jaylen Brown or move Derrick White, I'm sure that he would have moved Kristaps Porziņģis instead for Terrence Mann in the 22 overall pick instead of the salary filler contract in Georges Niang, and that would have flipped between Brooklyn and Boston in the receiving order. I ultimately do think the key telling tale here is taking a guy in Georges Niang to once again show that dropping below the second apron was the point, right? Keeping these guys in Jaylen Brown and Derrick White is key. And like I mentioned on Monday in that video that didn't get uploaded where you saw the clip earlier today, and I'm like mentioning today, right? We are at 2 o'clock as of recording. Right now we are 6 hours before the draft. I still don't see a trade involving Jaylen Brown or Derrick White here on draft night. I see them staying long-term with this Celtics squad, and I'm really hoping for a report to drop in the next couple of days, letting us know that they potentially tried to have those guys on the market, but obviously they're not moving them and they are going to be keeping them. So we can shut these rumors down, can focus on to next season, and really try to figure out how this team is really going to retool without Jayson Tatum being out. Like I said, they still have the flexibility of Simons' contract, Sam Hauser's contract, Georges Niang's contract, amongst many others too. Xavier Tillman, Neemias Queta, and whoever they do draft here tonight in potential to kind of swindle some things. So definitely keep your eyes out on the Boston Celtics as they have some uncertainty still revolving around their team. And on draft night, a night with a lot of speculation and a lot of talk really rising over these next couple hours. I do expect to see the Boston Celtics get involved in at least something, even if it's not a Derrick White or Jaylen Brown trade. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let me know what you guys ultimately think about all this news revolving around Jaylen Brown and Derrick White. Because like I said, I don't want to see them get traded. I don't think they're going to get traded. And like I mentioned, it's going to take an absolute godfather of a package to get a deal done. So let me know your thoughts down below. Like I said, I'll catch you guys in the next one later tonight when Patrick and I have our draft breakdown, whoever the Celtics do pick here tonight. So we'll definitely see you guys later. Have a great rest of your night, and go Boston Celtics. Peace out.